The 1960s gave us some of the most beloved and seemingly optimistic songs in music history. They were the soundtrack to a generation of peace, love, and cultural revolution. But what if that soundtrack was a carefully constructed lie? What if behind those catchy melodies and memorable hooks, there were stories of profound pain, bitter betrayal, and psychological torment that were hidden from the public? Today, we are peeling back the bright, psychedelic wallpaper of the decade to expose the darkness underneath. We are counting down the 10 darkest secrets behind classic songs of the 1960s, from FBI investigations and cries for help disguised as pop hits to real-life tragedies that were far more disturbing than the fiction they inspired. By the end of this countdown, you will never hear these timeless anthems the same way again. Let's begin. Number 10. Louie Louie by the Kingsmen, 1963. At number 10, we have a song so innocent, it was investigated by the FBI as a threat to national morality. When the Kingsmen released their garage rock version of Louie Louie, its famously slurred and nearly unintelligible vocals sparked a nationwide moral panic. Parents, teachers, and church groups across America became convinced that the song was filled with hidden, obscene lyrics, a secret message of filth being broadcast directly into the minds of their teenagers. Radio stations banned it, schools prohibited it from being played at dances, and the outcry grew so loud that it triggered a formal FBI investigation that would last for 2 years. Federal agents spent hundreds of taxpayer-funded hours analyzing the 3-chord rock song at different speeds, trying to decipher what they believed were pornographic messages corrupting the youth. The official FBI file, now declassified, reads like a surreal comedy, detailing how agents consulted with linguistics experts and even hired lip readers to analyze performance footage. The truth, however, was far more mundane and almost comical. The lead singer, Jack Ely, had braces on his teeth at the time of the recording, making his diction incredibly unclear. Compounding this was a rushed, low-budget recording session where the microphone was suspended high above his head, forcing him to shout and slur his words even more. There were no secret obscenities. The song was, as it had always been, a simple lament from a sailor about missing his girl. But by the time the FBI officially concluded that the song was unintelligible at any speed, the damage was done. The Kingsmen were branded as pornographers, received death threats, and saw their promising career derailed by a moral panic born from a simple case of bad dental work. Number 9, California Dreamin' by the Mamas and the Papas, 1965. At number 9 is the dreamy anthem that defined the West Coast hippie dream. California Dreamin'. The song sounds like pure sunshine, a beautiful ode to longing for warmth and a better place. But this masterpiece of harmony emerged from a dark and bitter nightmare of personal betrayal that was tearing the band apart from the inside. The song is not a daydream. It's the soundtrack to a collapsing marriage and a fractured friendship. The group's leader and primary songwriter, John Phillips, discovered that his wife and fellow bandmate, Michelle Phillips, was having an affair with the group's other male vocalist, Denny Doherty. This wasn't a private matter. It was a crisis that exploded at the absolute height of their fame, turning their public image of loving communal harmony into a carefully orchestrated lie. The betrayal was so profound that Michelle was temporarily fired from the group in 1966. For a period, the remaining 3 members had to perform their greatest hits about love and togetherness on national television, pretending that nothing was wrong, while their personal lives were in absolute ruins. John Phillips later described finding handwritten love letters between Michelle and Denny, detailing not just their affair, but their secret plans to leave the band and start a new life together. He said reading those letters was like watching his entire world collapse in real time. The song's creation itself is shrouded in this pain. It was written while John was using drugs heavily, trying to numb the agony of his crumbling marriage. The dreaming in the title wasn't just about California. It was about a desperate desire to escape the personal hell of his reality. Every time they sang those beautiful, soaring harmonies together on stage, They were performing a lie for an adoring public that had no idea of the emotional warfare happening behind the scenes. Number 8. Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones, 1966. At number 8, we have a song that sounds like the very definition of pure rock and roll rebellion. Paint It Black. With its menacing sitar riff and Mick Jagger's snarling vocals, it was instantly adopted as an anthem for cynical, rebellious youth. The dark truth, however, is that the song was not an artistic statement. It was a raw and unfiltered expression of Mick Jagger's battle with a severe, crippling depression following a devastating personal loss. The dark imagery wasn't a metaphor. It was a literal description of his psychological state. The inspiration came after Jagger learned of the sudden death of a close friend in a car accident. Those close to the band during this period described him as being completely shattered by the loss, unable to function normally. Studio musicians who worked on the sessions later recalled a Jagger they didn't recognize, withdrawn, hollow, often sitting alone in the corner of the studio for hours between takes, staring into space. The recording atmosphere was heavy with a genuine sense of grief. Brian Jones's haunting sitar melody, which gives the song its iconic sound, was not originally planned. It emerged spontaneously during a particularly difficult session, where Jagger was visibly struggling to get through the vocal takes. Jones, sensing his bandmates' fragile emotional state, began experimenting with the sitar to create a musical backdrop that could match the depth of Jagger's inner turmoil. The song's massive success became a tragic irony. The band had to perform it nightly on tour, forcing Jagger to relive his darkest emotional period every single time he stepped on stage. It was a nightly confrontation with his own trauma, a pain he began to numb with heavy drinking, all while the audience cheered for the darkness they thought was just a performance. Number 7. The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel, 1964. At number 7 is one of the most poetic and beloved folk songs of all time. For decades, Art Garfunkel maintained that The Sound of Silence was a philosophical meditation on humanity's failure to communicate. But years later, Paul Simon, the song's writer, revealed a much darker and more specific truth. The song was inspired directly by the collective trauma of the John F. Kennedy assassination and Simon's horror at what he perceived as society's emotional emptiness in its aftermath. Simon wrote the famous opening lines, "Hello, darkness, my old friend," while sitting in his bathroom with the lights off. The sound of the running water, a comforting presence in the quiet. He was reflecting on the literal silence that fell over New York City in the hours after the news broke on November 22nd, 1963. He became obsessed with the national numbness he witnessed. He spent weeks walking the streets of the city, watching people on the subway avoid eye contact, seeing families eat dinner in complete silence, and observing how the flickering light of the television replaced genuine human connection. The song's commercial success, however, plunged Simon into a deep moral crisis. He felt profoundly conflicted about profiting from a national tragedy. He began to question whether he had exploited America's collective grief for his own commercial gain. This internal conflict created a significant strain in his relationship with Art Garfunkel, who embraced the song's popularity and couldn't understand Simon's guilt. This disagreement over the song's meaning and the ethics of its success was one of the first major fractures in their partnership. For Simon, their biggest hit became a permanent reminder of what he saw as his own moral compromise as an artist. Number 6, House of the Rising Sun by The Animals, 1964. At number 6, we have a song whose dark secret was unknown even to the band that made it a global hit. When the Animals recorded their raw, electrifying version of the traditional folk song, House of the Rising Sun, they believed it was just an old tale about a fictional house of ill repute in New Orleans. They were horrified to learn the true story behind the lyrics only after their recording was already climbing the charts around the world. The house was real, and its history was genuinely disturbing. Historical research has since revealed that the actual House of the Rising Sun was a real establishment in 19th century New Orleans with a dark and tragic past. Police records and historical documents link the location to several unexplained deaths and disappearances of young women. It appears to have been a place where women were trapped in a form of indentured servitude, often with the protection of corrupt local officials who were paid to look the other way. Lead singer Eric Burdon became so obsessed with the song's dark history that he traveled to New Orleans multiple times to investigate, interviewing elderly residents about the local legends surrounding the place. What he discovered disturbed him so deeply that, for a time, he refused to perform the song live, causing immense tension with the band's management. His research uncovered evidence of a mysterious fire that destroyed the building in the 1920s, with some witness statements suggesting it may have been arson designed to destroy evidence. Contractually obligated to perform their biggest hit, Burdon later said that singing the song every night felt like celebrating violence against women. It's a chilling example of a band unknowingly unearthing and popularizing a real-life American horror story. Number 5. Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys, 1966. At number 5 is Brian Wilson's psychedelic masterpiece, remembered as a groundbreaking achievement in studio production. But the creative process nearly destroyed Wilson's mental health. Obsessed with topping the Beatles, Wilson descended into a deep paranoia during the 6-month recording process. He installed security systems in the studio, convinced rival musicians were trying to steal his ideas. The song's famous pocket symphony structure was partly the result of his deteriorating mental state, which made it impossible for him to focus. The pressure manifested in panic attacks and bizarre behavior, leading to his complete social isolation. By the time the song was released, Wilson was already retreating from public life, beginning a decades-long struggle with mental illness triggered by the creation of this very song. Number 4. Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan, 1965. At number 4 is a revolutionary anthem that was, in reality, a vicious personal attack disguised as art. The lyrics of Like a Rolling Stone were not social commentary. They were written about a specific person, a woman from the Greenwich Village social scene who had deeply and publicly humiliated Dylan at a party. The song's famous opening question, "How does it feel?" wasn't rhetorical. It was a targeted act of revenge. Session musicians revealed that Dylan's performance was so filled with genuine venom that several takes had to be discarded. Most disturbingly, the person who inspired the song reportedly suffered a nervous breakdown after its release, unable to handle being immortalized as the subject of such a cruel and public musical portrait. Number 3. Help by the Beatles, 1965. At number 3, John Lennon's desperate cry for assistance in this hit wasn't just a catchy hook, it was a genuine plea for help during the darkest period of his life. While Beatlemania was at its peak, Lennon was privately battling severe depression, panic attacks, and substance abuse. He later admitted the song's title was literal. He felt completely isolated, and the song's upbeat tempo was a deliberate mask to hide his psychological crisis behind the expected, cheerful sound of the Beatles. The most tragic aspect is that his cry for help was disguised so well that fans celebrated it as another uplifting anthem, completely missing the desperation at its core. Number 2. Sunshine Superman by Donovan, 1966. At number 2, this psychedelic classic appears to be a whimsical celebration of love and peace, but it was actually written while the folk singer was being manipulated and financially exploited by his own management team. The Sunshine Superman character was Donovan's idealized version of himself, someone strong enough to escape the control of others. Behind the scenes, his managers had created contracts that left the 20-year-old artist essentially trapped, forced to record and perform while receiving minimal compensation. The colorful, optimistic lyrics were a form of psychological escape from his powerless and depressing reality. Number 1. The End by The Doors, 1967. And at number 1, the darkest secret of all. The Doors' 11-minute epic wasn't just Jim Morrison's poetic meditation on mortality. It was his suicide note disguised as a song. Morrison wrote the lyrics during a period when he was actively and seriously planning to end his own life, and the band members later realized they had unknowingly helped create a musical farewell. Bandmate Ray Manzarek later discovered pages of Morrison's private writings that revealed detailed suicide plans, written at the same time as the song. The song's structure, building to an explosive climax before fading into silence, mirrored Morrison's psychological state and his intended final act. The song's success ironically saved his life temporarily, but his self-destructive behavior continued, ultimately leading to his death just 4 years later. These 10 songs continue to play on classic rock stations, their dark origins largely forgotten by time. They serve as a powerful reminder that behind every classic tune, there are real people who lived through real struggles. Their personal demons, their betrayals, their psychological crises. These became the secret ingredients in the soundtrack to our lives. The next time you hear one of these songs, remember that you're not just listening to music. You're hearing someone's deepest secrets, transformed into art that has, against all odds, outlasted the very pain that created it.